Good afternoon. So there are two questions on the minds of the DIB. The first is, when do I need to be compliant with 800-171 and CMMC? And the second is, how can I ensure compliance with complex regulatory requirements in a relatively simple and cost-effective manner? So our keynote speakers and others provided the definitive guidance on the first question. For organizations that handle CUI, you ought to be compliant now. But for DIB contractors, particularly SMBs that are unfamiliar with stringent compliance mandates, the all-important question is, how can I achieve compliance? And this session is all about that. How do I prepare for compliance? And we will walk you through an entire journey over here. So in order to meet 800-171 and CMMC, most organizations will need to rely on a cloud platform to store and share CUI that has impeccable foundations in compliance, so that the organization that is seeking compliance can inherit as much of the compliance as possible. So in the first segment of this presentation, we will introduce you to Amazon's Amazon Web Services GovCloud that is designed explicitly for government compliance mandates and is precisely such a platform. And Ted Stephan, who's the lead federal compliance acceleration chief for AWS Public Sector, will be providing you an introduction to AWS GovCloud. But AWS GovCloud, we emphasize, doesn't do it all. It does some of the heavy lifting, but for most organizations, you'll be sending, storing, and sharing CUI using some form of email or file sharing. So built on top of AWS GovCloud is PreVeil's encrypted email and file sharing system. And so in the next section, we'll deal with how we do that. Now, once you've done that, you need to build a system security plan, build your SPRS score, and you need documentation for that. We'll show how PreVeil provides that documentation, but more importantly, a platform, which is a GRC platform that can automatically compute the SPRS scores, help you keep track of your SSP, etc. And Matt Majot from ComplyUp will be presenting that. And finally, the all-important step. When all of that is done, you still need a really competent external third party that can stitch together the program and ensure that you're truly ready for an audit. And we are fortunate to have with us Jose Neto from PC Warriors, who's done that. So he took an organization working with AWS GovCloud and PreVeil in part, and took that organization in a real DIBCAC audit to 110. So he's going to share how he helps organizations stitch that together. So with that, over to Ted Stephan to introduce us to AWS GovCloud.
Awesome. Thanks, Sanjeev. I appreciate the introduction. Let me get my screen going here. And so as Sanjeev mentioned, I'm Ted Stephan here. I lead federal compliance acceleration for the government regions team here at AWS. I've got a couple things I'm going to walk you through in regards to how we can help you meet the 800-171 and future CMMC requirements. Talking about a little bit of the compliance on AWS, some of our US region and the compliance that they meet, how you can figure out what services have gone through the authorization process, and then probably most importantly, how to get access to some of our certification and accreditation documentation. So the first thing, we've got a couple different sets of US-based regions. We've got our commercial regions represented at the bottom of this slide. And those regions are authorized and able to process information that meets a number of different compliance programs. But the focus of today is really our GovCloud regions. And we've got one on the East Coast and the West Coast, both authorized at up to FedRAMP high, so moderate and high. As well as DoD impact level 4 and 5. There's a handful of other certification and accreditations that we have there, but let's move on into kind of the regions and how they all stack up. So from an AWS perspective, we've got what we refer to as our commercial regions, our US East-West regions. Those are connected to the internet, and anybody can access those. For the work that we're going to be focusing on in regards to CMMC is the GovCloud region. So that's that next box to the right. And you can see that, we list out that we can cover ITAR data, CUI, FOUO, sensitive but unclassified, PII, PHI, et cetera. Again, authorized at FedRAMP High and up to DoD Impact Level 5. Again, that region also connected to the internet for direct access, but we also have that connected to the NIPRNet for the DoD's usage. The next two regions are, we move over into the classified space. I'm not going to spend much time on those other than just calling out that they're there. We have the secret region running at DoD Impact Level 6, connected to CIPRNet, and the top secret region that is connected to JWICS. Whenever we talk about compliance and security within AWS, we talk about the shared responsibility model. So what that means is that there are things that we're going to do, and that's represented in the middle of the slide there. And then there are things that you as the customer are still responsible for. So we take care of security of the cloud while you are responsible for security in the cloud. I talked about the availability and looking up services that are available for usage. We all know that DFARS calls out that FedRAMP moderate equivalent services can be used for 800.171 workloads. So this is how you find out what services we have authorized in which region. So the box on the left there just represents the landing page for our services in scope site. And then the next box there talks about the various compliance programs. We expand that box out. And you can see I've selected FedRAMP here, and you'll see that we've got the services indicated in a handful of different statuses. Checkbox means that's fully been authorized by the FedRAMP Joint Authorization Board. But on the right, you can see we indicate when our third-party assessment organization begins the assessment of that service. Once they complete, it then moves over to JAB review for JAB authorization, and ultimately we, then get that checkbox. So that's how you determine what services we have authorized at what impact level. So now from a documentation perspective, within the AWS console, we have a document repository called AWS Artifact. And so within Artifact, there's a handful of different documents in there that you can get to, and there's reports and agreements in there. So the agreements, think of things like our HIPAA, BAA, and other types of compliance documentation that you can see. The view reports is where you're going to want to go to pick up the security and compliance documentation. So we select view reports. And you can see in here that I have typed out the FedRAMP customer package. We also have a CMMC customer package that has a lot of the same information. So hit the radio button, do the download, and you end up with this PDF over here. And the challenging thing with this PDF is you must open it in Adobe Reader, because you want to be able to get to the attachments that are in there. So if you've got your browser set up to open those PDF files within the browser, you're not going to be able to get to the attachments in this one. So you'll need to use Adobe Reader. And so the attachments here, you can see on the left a handful of different things. The most important one, and this is our FedRAMP control implementation summary and customer responsibility matrix. We also have one for CMMC. So you'll open that guy up, opens as an Excel spreadsheet, and you'll see a handful of tabs across the bottom. Those tabs represent both our commercial regions, CIS and CRM, and our GovCloud regions, CIS and CRM. And so within the GovCloud CRM, you'll notice that we've got all of the controls enumerated on the left, and we've got a column next to that that allows you to select whether or not that control can be inherited from AWS. And control inheritance, there's always the caveat that if you can only fully inherit that control if your entire system is running on AWS. If you have a component running somewhere else on premises or within another cloud service provider, you're not able to inherit that entire control from us. You still can inherit for the parts that are running in AWS, but you can't inherit it all. And I didn't expand over to the right, but we also indicate some of the services here that can help you meet those compliance requirements. So I know I ran through a bunch of stuff really quickly there, but there's my contact information for anybody that would like to dive in deeper and learn more. And with that, Sanjeev, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thank you. And we are moving quickly over here, but let's pick up. So Ted introduced you to the platform, but there's a lot over here. And for the average small to medium business, you want a further level of abstraction. So when you send or receive CUI, it's in the form of emails, it's in the form of files. And while the underlying platform is AWS GovCloud, we at PreVeil then say, let's build on top of that so that you can inherit all the compliance and the artifacts, and you don't have to almost even touch GovCloud. But we provide you with an encrypted email and file sharing system that is simple to deploy. It's an overlay with what you've got. And it's easy to use because our encrypted email works with your existing email address, works with your existing O365 or G Suite. And our file sharing systems, just like Dropbox or OneDrive, but is compliant, ransomware proof, and is running on top of the AWS platform. And so now you've got a mechanism or an application by which you can store and share this information. As Jose will share with you shortly, this approach led to a customer go through DIBCAG audit and get 110 out of 110 in a NIST 800 171 audit. And just as Ted alluded to, we inherit some of their compliances, then build on top of that and build our own compliance system so that we, PreVeil, who's the provider of the service, can be FedRAMP baseline moderate equivalent. You've heard a lot about FIPS 140-2 being the #1 challenging issue for compliance, and we handled that for your CUI, and also incident reporting with DFAR 7012 C through G. So you got these two, now you want to put your system security plan together, and that requires documentation, and you could do it yourself, which will take hundreds of hours in complexity, or work with us and we'll provide you with a baseline documentation that says, hey, here's what you're inheriting from us and AWS, here's the artifacts for it, here's the templates for it, and now you got yourself a strong foundation for about 84 out of the 110 controls, and are off to the races. Furthermore, the system, again, using FIPS 140-2, is fully encrypted on AWS GovCloud with end-to-end encryption. And once we do that, now you've got a baseline, but now you would want to basically now say, hey, what's my SPRS score? How am I doing my part of the compliance? In order to do that, we team up and integrate with, GRC, Governance, Risk, and Compliance platform providers. And Matt from ComplyUp is now going to show you how you can build on top of AWS and PreVeil and basically, collect all your information and compute your SPRS score. So over to you.
Hey, thank you so much, Sanjeev. So yeah, I'm Matt with ComplyUp. So ComplyUp is cloud-based software that helps DoD contractors prove compliance with CMMC and NIST 800 171. We do that through automation of documents. So I'm going to share my screen and just kind of show you a little bit of what's going on here. We're looking at the video?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we log into ComplyUp and we're going to select our CMMC level 2 assessment. It is similar to PreVeil, and this is why I'm going to name a bunch of reasons why the partnership with PreVeil makes so much sense, but we also use a zero trust encryption. We encrypt in the user's browser before it's sent to AWS GovCloud, which is where we host. Thank you, Ted. And so when you generate a ComplyUp assessment, you actually create the encryption key. We will never have access to it. Can't see our client's information, even if we wanted to. But once you gain access to the platform, you're going to be looking at the assessment dashboard. So here we're going to see things like a couple graphs around assessment progress, practices, tasks. So this is a brand new fresh assessment. So you're starting at 0. The SPRS score, this is a big ticket item. So this is showing -203, and that's because we've just started an assessment. So we're starting at -203. We want to work our way up to the +110. And how we're going to do that is we're going to work through each of the practices and respond to them individually, right? We'll say implemented or not implemented, and then we'll describe how it's implemented. Or we'll create plans of actions for if it's not implemented. So this is what a practice looks like. This is the workflow in ComplyUp. You've got the domain, you've got the practice ID, and the practice description. So that's the actual requirement that CMMC is requiring of you. This is one of the 110. Down below, we have some official guidance. We've got discussion around that particular requirement, further discussion around the assessment objectives, guidance, examples. All of this stuff comes from the CMMC appendixes or NIST 800-171A. So this is stuff we pulled from official documents. Assessment considerations, and then assessment objectives. That's a big deal, right? You want to get through each of those objectives to be able to say, hey, this is implemented. And speaking of which, at that point, you can choose an implementation status. Is it implemented, partially implemented, alternatively implemented? Maybe it doesn't apply to us. Is it inherited or not implemented at all? And if we can select that, I'm going to select implemented for this, and then we want to give our practice implementation statement. So in this box, we're going to actually type out how we've met that requirement. And we're killing 2 birds with 1 stone here. We're responding to the requirement, but we're also literally building our documentation at the same time. At the top right, there's a place to upload a piece of evidence or many pieces of evidence to associate to this particular requirement. So this works as a repository, and it actually associates the piece of evidence. So again, I want to point out a score of -203. You've just started your assessment. Now, let's say that you had signed up for PreVeil, then we can actually import PreVeil's inherited statements. So this is really, really cool. You can upload a file that you get directly from PreVeil, and they went through a lot of work to go through each requirement and say, hey, these are the requirements that you inherit when you use our product. When you are a subscriber of PreVeil, you immediately inherit these 84 requirements, these 84 practices, and here's how. And we've partnered together to say, hey, let's dump that into the ComplyUp platform. And boom, immediately, literally within minutes, when you upload that PreVeil file, I mean, you're 65.2% done with the assessment. You've got a lot of color in the practices graph and the tasks graph. And the biggest ticket item is that you went from -203 to a +40 in a matter of minutes because you signed up for PreVeil, and they've done a lot of the heavy lifting. And you've put it into ComplyUp to say, look, I've inherited all this from PreVeil. That's where I store my CUI. That's how I send my CUI. And now I'm using ComplyUp to actually see how that works, how that's coming together. You can sort through the requirements like I'm showing here, and you can see what's been completed and what's in progress. If it's still in progress, then that means that PreVeil didn't fully meet it. It's one of the last couple that you have to address. But the ones they did meet, the 84 that they do meet, this is now what we're still looking at 3.1.1 here, but now we're seeing a PreVeil inherited practice. It's the implementation status is implemented, it's inherited, and they've put some really beautiful verbiage in the practice implementation box. So this is going to show up in your system security plan when you produce it within ComplyUp. So you want to go through each of the requirements and kind of, you want to massage the ones PreVeil has met and then respond to the ones that they haven't met. And then we're going to head to the documentation tab. And that's where we're going to produce a bunch of reports. The big ticket items are the CMMC system security plan and the 800-171 system security plan. So I'm going to hit major. I can pick a major or minor revision. I'm going to hit major. So it's going to create version 1.0 for me. And it's going to ask me for a description. We're creating a paper trail here. We've got version control and ComplyUp. So you can show them the first system security plan you made a year ago and your perfect 110 score system security plan. And you just hit generate, and the platform is going to decrypt and then upload that system security plan for you. It's plugging in the information. It's basically taking a screenshot of the assessment in the platform and plugging it into a system security plan and spitting it out for you. So here we have the system security plan I created with PreVeil's inherited statements. You know, this is the version 1.0. It's got the date, it's got the description, the author, who created the system security plan. If we scroll down through some of the organization information and the system information here, we're going to get to section 5, which is the meat and potatoes. That's how you've responded to each one of the 110 practices. So here's 3.1.1, the one we were looking at. It's got the reference name, the description of the requirement, and then our status. You know, we said, hey, this is implemented and inherited because I use PreVeil. And here's the documentation. Here's my statement that says, hey, I'm using PreVeil to store and encrypt my CUI and to transfer it. And here's a statement showing you how I do that. There's a bunch of other reports you can pull from here. You can produce the NIST 800-171 system security plan, as well as the CMMC. You can pull out an Excel file of your evidence list. So basically a list of all the evidence and the associated practices, your plans of actions, any deficiencies, practice details in an Excel file, and then finally a breakdown of your SPRS score. So, you know, which one did PreVeil meet? What are the ones that are left? What are the weight of the ones that are left? So that I know how I stand and what I need to address quickly. And that, I mean, that's pretty much it for what I've got for you today. But it's basically to say, you know, it's not making CMMC easy, right? It's just that PreVeil has done such a heavy lift. You know, they've done the work for you. So signing up for them and with ComplyUp means that your information is stored in AWS, so you know it's secure, and you're using PreVeil to encrypt it, and you're using ComplyUp to produce the documentation to prove what you're saying. So the solution is really solid, and it's still going to leave you with a little gap at the end, which leads us to Mr. Neto here. He's going to take you to, okay, PreVeil got you this far. ComplyUp showed you how to document it. AWS is where it's stored, and now you have a service provider to say, I'm going to help you fill in the gaps and get to that positive 110, and ultimately a CMMC certification. So I will pass it back to Sanjeev and hopefully on to Mr. Neto.
On to Jose. I think we want to underscore that the steps that we have showed you simplify things, but compliance is a complex undertaking. And we would absolutely suggest that no one, unless you are an expert, meander into it, you know, yourself, including with the support of PreVeil. And so what you need is a registered practitioner that can actually put together and ensure that you're ready for a rigorous audit. And Jose has done it with perfect results. And so over to you, Jose, on to how you make the final steps happen.
Hi, good afternoon, Sanjeev and everyone. Thank you for the opportunity as always. So today I have good news, and I'm not going to say bad news, but I'm going to say news that are room for improvement, opportunity growth. So the first question that I believe everyone has is this attainable? Is it achievable? Are we working towards something that even a small, medium, or enterprise can actually achieve? So the good news is that, yes, it's been done. We were fortunate and we are honored that we were able to be the first DIPCAC, official DIPCAC assessment after the COVID-19 pandemic. So it was a great partnership with DoD, the defense contracting industry, and all coming together to do the main goal, which is to secure our national security and enhance cybersecurity posture. So the great news is that we raised the bar and we proved to industry that this is attainable. And today I want to bring to you 3 actionable tips that you can do this in order to get to that roadmap. So we'll keep it short, simple, concise, but these are actionable recommendations for those of you out there. So the first one is finding your start line to better plan for the finish line. Second one is strategic allocation of resources. And the last one is planning for success. And what is success? What does success look like in our missions? It's basically a secure and compliant IT infrastructure. But first, notice that I put secure as in my priority is security comes first and compliance is the end result, not the other way around. So let's start out with the first one. I want to start by saying that our company receives tons of phone calls from different defense contractors, and they always have the end goal in mind. They want to know what the finish line looks like and how long it's going to take and what are the resources that we need and what's going to take to go to the finish line. But I would say primarily everybody should be focusing on the start line. It's like putting a GPS and having your destination, but your GPS doesn't know where you're actually located. And you can't go from point A to point B if you don't have a start line. And I believe that is the #1 challenge for all these defense contractors, that they don't understand what their cybersecurity posture is. If you ask their ISSMs, so what is your current cybersecurity posture? Maybe they'll refer me to a SPRS score. But then the next question is, what is the confidence that that SPRS score is actually indeed accurate and a reflection of the company? So this is where I see the majority of our clients. They have this idea that they're probably in the high 100s and the 90s, and they've actually had other gap analysis performed. But when we go in, we have a different way of methodology. We're very thorough in trying to provide and bring that clarity for everybody. Once the defense contractor understands exactly where they're at, that is the start line. And now we can program the GPS so we can go from point A to point B. One of the things that I would like, and we brought up the term gap analysis. For the past 2.5 years since COVID times, gap analysis has been, I guess, the de facto assessment. But we believe that gap analysis, the way it's being performed, it's more of a checklist mentality and checking the boxes. And we believe that checking the boxes may give you a very limited image of where you're at, but it certainly does not have the rigor to give you the maturity level. So we introduced a comprehensive readiness assessment, which is, instead of a gap analysis checklist mentality, this is more like a pen testing style assessment. Penetration testing, for those of you that are not familiar with a pen testing term. But what this does is it not only checks the box whether this is compliant or non-compliant, but we try to spread the word with industry that we have to validate the effectiveness of each security control. And as we validate the effectiveness, that's where the maturity comes in. That's where we can document the maturity and we can upload it as artifacts to these other platforms such as ComplyUp that will track and everything and track your score and implement and see where you're at, see the progress, right? So then what we'll say is, let's move on to strategic allocation of resources. There's so many things, so many moving pieces. We're tracking our cloud environments. We're tracking our encrypted email solutions. We're tracking I know a lot of the other panelists, they mentioned multi-factor authentication, zero trust. There's so many things moving that we need an adequate IT budget. And so this is more for executive leaders, senior managers. Make sure you allocate an adequate budget so that your ISSMs, your ISSOs, your compliance officials can actually deploy and build you a secure infrastructure. I would say experienced talent pool is another recommendation. And the reason for that is you need someone who can understand not only security, but also the compliance piece of it. And since we're working towards the goal of being compliant, time needs to be managed appropriately. So the best analogy I can give you is, you have an orchestra. You have all these nice instruments, the violins, the cellos, and the strings, and all these instruments, but you do need a conductor that can put it all together. That conductor will basically give you that beautiful piece of music. And in this case, the goal would be 110, the perfect score.
And if I may, on that lovely note, to try to keep everything on track, I think that Orchestra Maestro is an entity like PC Warriors and like you, Jose. So hopefully in these 30 minutes, we've provided you with certainly showing you the complexity, but then showing you how, by building on top of simple systems and working with an entity such as Jose, the goal of 110 is attainable and doable. We would, of course, be delighted to, work with you on this. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. I'd like to thank my co-panelists, Jose, Matt, and Ted, for hosting this, and thank you to the participants for tuning in.